Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Avid Tech Talk webcast series. These sessions were created for Avid customers and partners who administer, design, use, and implement Avid products. The sessions were also created to help you be more successful with the deployment and use of our products. Today's session focuses on Sibelius, and we'll be providing you with tips on designing a custom house style. Today's session is a live webcast presentation. The session is not designed with polished marketing content. Instead, these sessions are less formal and they're focused on providing participants with technical content and as much demo time as possible. I'm Vicki Moreno, Senior Director of Customer Care at Avid, and I'll be the host of today's session. Today's technical content will be presented by Tom Betts and John Manning, the two guys on the right. Tom's been with Avid for 15 years, and during this time, he's been dedicated to providing support for the Sibelius product line. Tom is our internal Sibelius guru on the support side, and he's what we call the product champion for Sibelius. Prior to joining Avid, Tom worked as a private music teacher and also a composer. Tom plays multiple instruments, primarily trombone and euphonium, and he also plays piano and guitar. John Manning will be co-presenting with Tom. You'll hear him speaking a little bit less, but he's just as important, and he's an Avid technical support specialist working on Sibelius. Prior to working with Avid, John worked as an audio engineer, creating radio spots, commercials, and music productions for a variety of genres. John plays guitar, electric bass, and also creates MIDI arrangements. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and John now. Let's start.
Okay, thank you very much, Vicki. In today's session, we're going to cover exactly what a house style is in Sibelius, how to modify various aspects of the house style to create your own custom look or to match up with a music publisher's specifications. And finally, we'll look at how to work with your customized house style whenever you create a new score. A house style is essentially the overall look of a score, as defined by a publisher or as defined by a composer. In Sibelius, the house style is mostly determined by items in the house style section of the Appearance tab in the ribbon. This includes engraving rules and note spacing rules, but it also includes text styles, note heads, symbols, etc. Sibelius comes with 24 predefined house styles, and quite frankly, they're set up very expertly, and you can get away with using them in most instances. Each house style will have a name that says the type of music it's for example, jazz. The music font used. Sibelius comes with 4 different music fonts, Opus and Helsinki, which are kind of classical, and Reprise and Inkpen, which are more of a handwritten jazzy look. And optionally, it may state what the text font is. Blanton, Times, Georgia, Arial, etc. If you're creating a custom house style and you start with a predefined house style that's close to what you want, you won't need to change as many settings, and that can save you some time. The various design aspects of a house style include things like the engraving rule options, text styles, symbol designs, note heads, instrument definition, line design, object positions within the score, note spacing rules, various aspects of the document setup, such as the size of paper you're using, the size of your staff, how the margins are set up, words defined in the playback dictionary that influence the playback of the score, and default settings for the appearance of the parts. Now, under each of these headings are a lot of settings that can be tweaked and adjusted, and obviously we're not going to have time to go over all of them today due to the time constraints. So what we'll do is we'll concentrate on the things most commonly changed by users. So now let's jump out of the PowerPoint and actually get into Sibelius and take a look at some of these house style settings. Here we have the quick start, and this is where the predefined manuscript templates are located. And you'll see they're separated into categories. And normally we would be scrolled all the way to the top here. And in the no category section, we've got our blank manuscript paper and a bass and treble clef manuscript. I thought for today's presentation we would work on a jazz lead sheet. So I'm going to start with the treble staff manuscript template. When you select the manuscript template, you get this dialog, and over here on the right-hand side, you can set up various aspects of the score. You can actually change the house style, which we won't do at this time. Change the instruments that are in the score. We can select the time signature. I think I'll leave it at 4/4. If you want, you can put in a pickup bar at this point. Select your key signature. And I think I will actually, well, I'll do that later. I'm going to put in a title and a composer text, and I'll stick a copyright in here as well, just so we can see how they look in the lead sheet whenever we start making adjustments, so that we can see what our changes are doing. And then we can just click Create. Okay, and here we have a single staff score, actually, over here. Looks very, very classical, I would think. Title and composer in a nice font, a nice classical treble clef, 4/4, very solid looking. But since we're making a jazz lead sheet, we'll probably want to tweak these a bit. Okay, before I get started tweaking things, let's put a few notes in here and some other elements so that whenever we start making changes, we can see what effect it has. So I'll put in a few notes. Take these. And let's put in some chord symbols. Oops. I'm going to stick in a couple of repeats, which we do under the notations tab. Start repeating and repeat. Put in a rehearsal mark. What else? I think it's good enough for right now. Okay, one of the most common things that you'll be doing in creating a custom house style or working off of a publisher's spec sheet is editing the various text styles that are available in Sibelius to change the font or change the size of the font or perhaps the placement of the text. So under the Text tab in the ribbon, and over here we'll see the word Styles, and there's a little arrow just to the right of Styles. And what that arrow will do is open up the Edit Text Styles dialog. And this is scalable, so let's make it a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit better. What this is a list of all the text styles that are currently defined in the score. And you can see there's quite a few of them. However, if that's not enough for you, you can always select one of the text styles and click New Text Style and create your own text style based on the existing one. We're not going to do that today, but what we are going to do is edit some of the existing text styles to create our own unique look. Common Symbols text style is the text that involves note heads, clefs, the notation elements, and music font elements of the score. So we can select Common Symbols and then click the Edit button. Here we can change the font, change the size of the font, change how it appears in the score. In this case, Opus Standard is a classical font. Since this is going to be a jazz lead sheet, I want to change this to a jazzier font. The two jazz fonts that come with Sibelius are InkPen 2, which I'll show you here. Select InkPen 2. And you can see a preview of it over here on the right-hand side. So that's our InkPen 2. And then the other one is a font called Reprise. I kind of prefer the look of Reprise over the Opus. And it also has a jazzy handwritten look to it. So I'm going to select Reprise, and when I click OK, the music fonts in the score are going to change, and so just make note of that. Click OK, and you see our treble clef has now taken on a more handwritten look, and the notes are looking more handwritten, so a little jazzier. Okay, the other thing, now these chord symbols, they look pretty straightforward. And in jazz lead sheets, that's not that uncommon, but I think I'd like ours to look a little more handwritten, a little more like a handwritten lead sheet. So I can select chord symbols in the Edit Text Styles dialog, and then click the Edit button. And to keep with our Reprise theme, I'm going to go down here to the Reprise font. And let's see, well, we actually have a Reprise chords. We have Reprise chords and a Reprise chord standard. So let's look at what the difference is between those two. So there's Reprise chords, and then if I select Reprise chords standard, you'll see that the standard version of the font is a little bolder. It's got a little more bolder look to it. So let's click OK and see what that looks like in our score. Okay, I think those look pretty jazzy. I think they might be a little small for my eyes. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to increase the font size, which you do up here. And you'll see you can adjust the size in the score and the size in the parts separately. So in this case, I'm going to ramp it up. Let's go up to 14 points and see what that looks like. I think that's a good size for the chord symbols, so we'll take that. The next thing that we can adjust in here would be the rehearsal mark, and that's a nice classical looking A, but let's do something with that. So let's go down to rehearsal mark, click Edit, and you'll notice here the font's grayed out and you can't change it. That's because the font box isn't selected. So all we need to do is select it, and then we can pick our font from the drop-down list. And we're going to stay with Reprise, but let's do Reprise Script. Actually, Reprise Script Standard. This will be a little bit bolder. See what that looks like. Okay, I kind of like that. We'll take it. And also our title and composer could stand some jazzing up. So let's select title. Edit. And once again, we need to mark the font box so we can change it. And I think I'm going to stay with Reprise, and there is actually a Reprise title, which gives us this nice bold look. Reprise title, and the title could be a little bit bigger, so we can go in here, kick that up, say 25 point, see what that looks like. Okay, I'm liking that, and we can scroll back up to Composer, Edit, and let's just change that to Reprise Script, I think. Okay, I think that all looks real good. About the only thing that's looking real classical is the time signature now. So let's fix that. Go down here to time signatures, edit. Instead of Opus standard, let's go to Reprise standard. Which, for some reason, isn't right below Reprise. Okay, there we go. Now let's see what that looks like. Okay, I like the look of the font, but the time signature isn't spaced out properly, so we're probably going to need to make an adjustment there. So we go back into the edit dialog, and down here under Advanced Formats, you'll see there's actually a setting for line spacing, and it's set at 25%, which obviously for Reprise is too small. So let's kick it up to 100 just to see what we get. And whenever you're making adjustments to the look of your score, you will do a lot of trial and error experimenting, especially initially, until you get used to what the various settings do, and you know, what might be appropriate. As you get more experienced, you can dial it in pretty fast. I'm going to click OK, and let's see what happens to our time signature. Okay, we can see over here that it's now too far apart. So somewhere between 25 and 100 is where we want to go. And just looking at that, I'm going to guess about 75. And you can use these arrows to scroll, but if you're making big jumps, you'll just want to highlight and type in the number. So 75 looks pretty good to me. I could almost take that the whole way. I'm going to go ahead and close this and zoom in a little bit. Okay, our time signature is pretty good. I think it could stand to be moved up just a little bit. And you don't do that in the edit text styles. What we actually want to do is we want to adjust the default position for the time signature. And we do that under the Appearance tab in the ribbon in the Design and Position section. And once again, if you click on this little arrow just to the right of Design and Position, that'll open the Default Positions dialog. And here we have a listing of all our text styles. We can also change the position of lines and change the position of other objects from this dialog. So under text styles, we want to locate our time signature. And we'll see here that its vertical position relative staff is 1 space. So let's change that to 1.5 and see what happens. Now, it won't move until I click OK, so click OK. Okay, that was too much, obviously. So we come back in here, and let's split the difference and go with 2.2. And that looks almost perfect. Let's see if we can get it perfect. That's 1.9, so let's go 1.7. More. Those are some really fine steps there. Okay, we'll go with 1.1. There we go. I'm liking the way that's setting. Zoom back out a little bit. Yep, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now, so far so good. Now it's looking pretty jazzy. Let's go and tweak a few more settings. Since we're under the Appearance tab, we've got the House Style section over here on the left-hand side, and we have our note spacing rule and our engraving rules. It would be very unusual to make any changes in the note spacing rules. These have been set up to engraving standards that have been, developed over the years, and really would be unusual to make any changes there. So we're going to go into engraving rules and see what we have available. Okay, so here are all the aspects that you can adjust in engraving rules. And we're just going to touch on a few of the more common ones. One of the things that that we can have a variety of settings for is bar numbers. So we're going to select bar numbers, and you'll see here we can select the frequency that they appear. We can set it to every bar. We have bar numbers on every bar. That looks a little busy. A very common setting would be to have bar numbers every 4 bars or every 5 bars. That gives us that look. And then also every 8 or every 10 bars are some common settings. Every system will put them at the left-hand side of the staff at each system, and I think that's the setting that I'm going to use. I'm also going to hide them at rehearsal mark, so if we happen to have a rehearsal mark at the beginning of a system, you won't see both the rehearsal mark and the bar number. You can specify where the bar numbers appear if you had multiple instruments in a score and you wanted to see the bar numbers, say, on the flute part or above the flute staff in the score, and also above the first violin part, for example. You could select that in here. Those are all the settings I think we need to change. I'm going to go ahead and click OK and see what that looks like. Okay, we're back. Okay, so that's good. You can make adjustments to bar lines. A lead sheet is probably one of the few times where you would be making a change to how the bar lines work in the score. And that's because in jazz there's a convention to put an initial bar line on a single staff, which is the opposite of classical music. And in the bar line section of engraving rules, we've got a setting for that. So bar line at the start of a single staff. So we can mark that. And the other thing I'm going to mark in here is wings on repeat bar lines. If you look at our repeat here, it's nice and plain. But if I mark this box, it'll put some wings on it. I'll show you what that looks like. Put some wings on it. And it makes it easier to pick out the repeats. I like that setting. Oh, and of course you see there's a bar line now. Bar line now at the far left side of the staff. Let's see, beams and stems, brackets. I don't think we need to make any changes there. However, chord symbols, there's a lot of tweaky settings here that you can use to get the exact look that you want. In our example, I think I'm only going to make 2 changes, and that's to the major 7th chords. Rather than having it MAJ7 or Mage 7, I'm going to make it a triangle 7, very jazzy look. And also, instead of G plus 7, which is kind of weird to a jazz person, I'm going to mark this box and switch it to G7, and this will change it to G7 plus. I'll show you what that looks like. So here our major 7th chord has a triangle instead of mage, and it's G7, and then the plus is to the right of the 7 to indicate augmented. Okay. Let's see what else we can get. Let's see what other trouble we can get into here. Clefs and key signatures. This involves spacing. We don't really need to do anything here. We're not really working with a guitar, but this is where you can adjust the look and feel of your guitar frames. And then moving down to instruments. While this isn't really relevant in a lead sheet, I did want to point out a couple things here. This is where you can control how the instrument names appear to the left-hand side of the staff, whether you have to show the full name or the short name. And you can also adjust when system separators appear. And in scores where you've got multiple instruments and you have more than one system on a page, these are diagonal, fairly thick lines that will appear. And I wanted to show you what they look like. So I'm going to change this from appear when there's 8 staves or more to 0. So we'll see the system separators between all the systems here. I click OK. And so there are these big, heavy black lines. And by default, they'll appear whenever you've got 8 instruments and more than one system on a page. And you can't get rid of them by clicking on them and deleting them like you can with many things in Sibelius. The only way you can get rid of them is to go into engraving rules and switch them off or change the number of staves. So if I uncheck that, click OK, our system separators have gone away. Change these back to the default. So jazz articulations, there's just spacing things, and they're very nicely spaced. Rehearsal marks, we could change our rehearsal mark, and where'd it go? Can't see it, so let's put another rehearsal mark in here so we can see what's going on. Well, good enough for now. Okay, and we can change the rehearsal marks to be 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of ABC. We can change it to be bar numbers, which would be pretty common. So there's bar 2, bar 4. Leave it at that for right now. Slurs, staves. Now, I guess I can show you something here in staves. Excuse me, in the middle section, justification, you see there's a setting there, justify staves when the page is at least, and 65% full is the default. Some people, myself included, find this to be a little low, in that as soon as your page gets as soon as your page gets 65% full, the staves will justify and spread out to fill up the page. I actually prefer this setting to be about 75. That way it's not reformatting all the time. So, and let's see, anything else in engraving rules? No, I think so far so good. I think that's all we need to look at in the engraving rules. But now let's take a look at the document setup, page layout. And we'll find that under the Layout tab. On the left-hand side, we've got Document Setup, and a little arrow to the right of that will open up the Document Setup dialog. Okay, here we can see a preview of the document, and we can select our measurement, whether we want to use inches, millimeters, or points. I prefer to work in inches. And before we get into this any further, let me go and turn some settings on. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to go to the View menu, and I'm going to switch on page margins. And when I do this, now we see a dotted blue line showing us where the page margins are set to. And we can see here we've got a gap between the left-hand side of the staff and the page margin, and the right-hand side of the page, right-hand side of the staff snaps right up to the page margin. So this gives us an indication of what settings we might want to change. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch off this green playback line while I'm here. Get it out of the way. And then we can go back to Layout, Document Setup. Okay, page size, letter. That's appropriate for what I'm doing. But you can see here in the drop-down we've got all different, whole bunch of different type of page settings, including the European A4, A3 and A4. I'm going to leave it set on letter. And you can also type in, if you've got some weird custom-sized page, you can actually enter your own width and height here. Staff size is 0.28 inches. I think that's actually kind of big, so I'm going to reduce it down to 0.25. You can see it changed in the preview. Page margins are just what they say. They're just like in a Word document. They're where the text or the staves are going to appear. And you can have different settings for your left and right pages, useful if you're doing like a booklet. I think in this case we'd want them to be the same. I think 5'9" is a little generous, and we can change that to a ½ inch margin the whole way around. Okay. Now, there's two types of margin settings, the page margin and the staff margin. And what the staff margin controls is the distance between the staves and the page margins. And you can have different settings for the first page, which makes sense because that's where you're going to have the title, you're going to have text up at the top, and subsequent pages where you can get a little closer to the page margin. So just for the sake of argument, I'm going to change this to 0.25. I'm going to leave it a ½ inch at the bottom. And I don't like this little gap over to the left-hand side. And that's caused by the full and short name settings here that are leaving a little extra space. So I'm going to take those guys out since I'm not going to have any instrument names on my lead sheet. I'm going to click OK. And we can see here that this is snapped closer to the margin. The title's moved up, and that all looks good. I'm going to take this reverse mark out. It's bugging me. Okay, I think we've tweaked this sufficiently, and we've got a nice look here. It really looks like a lead sheet now. And so what are we going to do with this? Well, maybe we can continue on and create a lead sheet, but what if we wanted to use it in subsequent documents? It's important to note that the house style settings apply only to the score that you're working on. So if you want to use the same settings for all your files, you've got two options. You can export, import a house style, or you can create your own manuscript template. And we're going to look at both of those things right now. So the first thing I'm going to want to do before saving my house style is to clean it up, because I don't want all these notations to appear. So I'm going to take those out. I'll leave title and composer, and we'll talk about that in a sec. You can leave the title and composer when you're creating your manuscript paper, and some people like to do that because then instead of having to go into the text field, they can just double-click, backspace, and enter their text. That's one way of working with it. Or whenever you go to create the manuscript paper, the text will go away. Okay, so under the Appearance tab, over on the left-hand side in the House Style section, we've got an Export and an Import. And this will export the house style, and we'll use this to import the house style. So whenever you click Export, ask you to choose a name for your house style, and I'm going to call this Tom's Lead Sheet. Okay, and what this has done is this has saved the house style. So if I go and open up an existing score, I can go into Appearance, Import, and here's a list of all the available house styles. These are all the ones that were included with Sibelius. And I've got one here called Tom's Lead that I did while I was practicing, and then the one that we just created called Tom's Lead Sheet. So you can import everything in the house style, or you can select just which items that you want. So if there's only some specific aspects that you want to import, you can adjust that, and you can select all, select none. I don't know why you would do that, but I guess you would do that if you only wanted to import just the text style changes, for So select all, click OK, and the look of this score has changed quite a bit. So that's exporting and importing a house style. The other thing that we can do is we can export it as a manuscript paper. And to do that, we go to the File menu, Export, and we select manuscript paper at the bottom of this list. Okay, first thing we're going to want to do is name our manuscript paper. And then you can opt whether you're going to keep the title, composer text. So the stuff that essentially would be attached to the first bar of the score. And some people like to do that so that they can just double-click back up and type in the title and the composer rather than having to go to the text menu and enter it that way. I like to enter it during the quick start process, so I'm going to actually unmark this. I don't want to keep the title and composer. And then you can choose a category for it to display in. If you select no category, that's going to appear right at the top with your bass and treble manuscript papers and the blank manuscript paper. If you're doing a lot of custom house styles, you might want to have a category for your own personal styles. So I'm going to call these Tom's Styles. And this will create a category that will appear in the Quick Start menu. And then I just click Export. And hopefully that has created a manuscript template for us. So let's take a look. So we're going to File, New. Here's our Quick Start dialog. And if I scroll down, these will be in alphabetical order. I'm going to have to scroll way down to get to Tom. So here we've got Tom Styles, and we've got the lead sheet. And you'll notice it's taken out the title and the composer and just left us with a single staff. I'm going to 4-4, stick a key signature in here just for fun. And this is where I would enter the title and the composer. It just makes it a whole lot neater. It stores it in the score information section under the File menu. And there we have the start to my song. The copyright notice down here at the bottom. And looking good. Okay, so let me go back to the PowerPoint. So today we've taken a look at what a house style is and how to modify the various aspects of the house style. And once you've done that, how to use that newly customized house style in creating new scores or modifying existing scores. And so now we're going to move on to questions and answers. But before doing that, I'd like to start up a poll that you can take while we're going through the question and answer session.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom. I really appreciate it. Everybody, we're hoping that we can get some feedback from you while we're in the session. So as Tom mentioned, if you could give us a little feedback, that would be great.
So we do got a couple questions here, Tom. The first one is, I want to share my house style I made with some other arrangers. How do I do this? Where are they stored?
That's a very good question. On Windows, you're going to find them under your Start menu, All Programs, Avid, and you'll find a shortcut here to Sibelius 7 user data. And this will take you to the user data folder, which is actually in app data roaming for those of you window experts out there. Actually, I was working in Sibelius 7.5, so I think we'd probably want to go into the Sibelius 7.5 user data folder. And here, hopefully, if we're lucky, yeah, here are our house styles. And down here at the bottom is Tom's lead sheet. So you could just locate that, send that to your colleague, and they would just place it in this house styles, in the house styles folder on their computer, and it would be available for their use. Likewise with the manuscript paper. You can see here my custom manuscript, and there's Tom's lead. Or I think we actually created Tom's styles. So there's our lead sheet. That make sense? That answer that question, John?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll just mention on the Mac, you open up Finder on the Go menu, hold down the Option key, and that user library will become available. So you can get to this, basically the same thing. You'll get to user library, Avid, Sibelius 7.5, and you'll find those in there.
Ah, very good.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, yeah, we got another one here. What would be the best import options to use when importing a house style to an already completed score? I don't want to mess things up too much.
Well, okay, let's take a look at that dialog real quick here. So under Appearance Import, okay, playback dictionary words, if you don't know what's in the house style, I would uncheck that along with instrument definitions. Note heads, you're probably going to want to leave. Note heads, clefs, lines, symbols, text, I would probably leave all that because those are kind of the key appearance elements of a house style. And if you're importing something, I would leave all those marked. Engraving rules and document setup, maybe, maybe not. Note spacing rule, I wouldn't worry about that. Default multiple part appearance settings, I would probably leave that checked. And then magnetic layout settings, I would probably uncheck that, keep the defaults. And that's only if you don't know what you're going to get. So, for example, if I'd leave that, take that out, leave that. So with those settings, you know, if I go back to something like Helsinki with Georgia font and click OK, so it's reverted back to a more classical look, but hasn't added a lot of, quote, secret settings that you might not see the effect of until you get to a certain point in the score.
Okay, nice.
And you can always do a Control-Z or a Command-Z on Mac to undo it if the style that you imported doesn't look good.
Yeah, just undo it.
Isn't what you want. Yeah, you just undo it, which is shortcut is Control-Z.
Okay. Yeah, we have another question here from Mike in the chat. He's asking, how did you base your current house styles? Were these taken from some sort of notational common standards? I guess he's talking about the already existing ones that come with Sibelius.
Yes, they are based on long-standing engraving conventions. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly which ones, but I do know that they were taken from, you know, the existing conventions that most music publishers use.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and Mike's asking again, do most publishers give the composer a house style that they want used?
You know, I'm not really, haven't really been working professionally as, you know, with music publishers, so I'm not entirely sure. I do know they have something called style sheets, which specify for a given project, you know, what staff size to use, what kind of music fonts are acceptable, where they want, you know, certain objects to be positioned. But I think in a lot of cases, since there's a lot of freelance copyists out there, I think the major music publishing houses are happy to accept either a Finale or a Sibelius score, engraved however it's engraved, and then they can just import their own inside house style into that document.
Oh, okay. The publisher will do that then sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much, John and Tom. That was very enlightening and helpful. Okay, well, it's about time to close up this session. First of all, thanks, Tom and John, for today's Tech Talk. It was really great. For anybody that's looking to learn more about Sibelius and dig in more deeply than you already have, it might be worth going to shop.avid.com and picking up the Sibelius reference guides. We've got the reference guide for both Sibelius 7 and Sibelius 7.5 available. And again, you just go to shop.avid.com, and then under services and training, you can pick training resources and then books and ebooks. Last but not least, thank you all for attending today's webcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and we hope that you found the information valuable. I'd suggest that you visit the Tech Talk registration page to register for upcoming sessions. We'll be posting another series pretty soon, so please visit often. As we plan the next webcast series, we also want to make sure that we include topics that are valuable to our customers. I appreciate those of you that answered the poll. That was great. But we are also going to be sending out a survey within the next 24 hours in case anything else comes up for you and you get any kind of great ideas for future webcasts. We'd love to hear them because we want to provide sessions on what you find interesting. If you could take a few minutes to complete the survey, that would be great, and much appreciated. You see up here, we've got the Avid Connect event coming next April at NAB, so please also check that out. And if you've got any other questions, comments, or feedback on today's session, always feel free to just email customer.care@avid.com. And thanks everybody for attending the session, and thanks again to John and Tom.